Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So the words that you see behind me are the poetic musings of an 8-year-old. And today I'd like to apologize to that 8-year-old for betraying her trust, because I took out these from a diary, long forgotten, and decided to put it out in public domain. As you can see, I was obsessed with the moon growing up. I thought there was nothing as beautiful as the moon. I would gaze up at the night sky on summer nights at my parents' balcony, and I would just wonder at the constellations that would be around, the way airplanes would glide by, and just that awe of experiencing your first shooting star. There was just nothing as beautiful as the night sky for me. And I remember, since I was such a solitary kid, that the night sky was my canvas for all things imaginative and beautiful. But before I was a dreamer, I was a reader. I remember devouring fantastical tales of Umroyar and Aladdin and the Tilsim-e Hoshruba inhabitants. I'm sure a lot of us read that in our spare time. I remember dreaming about robots and about otherworldly creatures. The way science was portrayed in these things really appealed to me. But when we talk about reading, I think what's important here is, and that we forget is, that reading population all across the world has decreased. And that's a shame. And today I'm here to make a case for why reading, but especially reading science fiction and interacting with science fiction, is so important. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you in this room picked up either a science fiction or a fantasy novel in the past, let's say, 1 week? Now, if you see a quick glance around the room will tell you it's a very small number. And that doesn't really surprise me, because science fiction on the whole has taken a hit. Science fiction has always had to fight for its place to be considered serious literature. And chances are that if you're someone who enjoys science fiction, you've either been labeled a nerd or a geek. But science fiction tells us so much more than about what latest technology does and how science plays a role in our life. And since you're all here, I want to take this opportunity to do a really quick book club, which is going to be the quickest book club in the history of ever, because I'm going to tell you about a story that I just finished reading. And it's a story about the end of the world. Now, in this story, the main character, Catherine, is about 8 years old when a flu epidemic wipes off about 99% of the world's population. 20 years down the line, she is now part of a traveling theater that goes around different American cities and puts up productions of Shakespeare's plays. Now imagine that in this world, there's a significant population that has no idea of the great advancements that humans have made thus far. So this population has no idea at all what mobile phones are, how electricity works, or what even the internet is. But within the doom and gloom and chaos of this world that no longer makes sense, this traveling theater, which is the last remnant of a collective human culture, is what tethers this population together. It is this belief that as human beings, whatever obstacles that are thrown our way, we'll still overcome them. Now, Station 11, which is the novel that I was talking about, it gives us that insight into how innovation and creativity are directly linked to progress, and why it's important, and how science fiction can play a role. I know you must be wondering, what does science fiction have to do with all of this? But bear with me. I want to take you on a journey. You're 11 years old when you go through the world of Captain Nemo in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. You're so fascinated by the world that's underwater that you decide there and then that when you grow up, you're going to create a machine such as the one that's in the novel. I know it sounds science fictional, but I'm happy to report it's actually a real story. This is the story of Simon Lake, who's the inventor of the first US Navy submarine in the 1890s. He was so fascinated, so overwhelmed by the otherworldly world that he experienced in the novel, that he took hours and hours and years of painstaking research to create this. He used to call Jules Verne his director general of life. And that's not all. Here's the mobile phone. We all have one. We've all used it. And none of us really connected to science fiction. But the mobile phone has origins in science fiction because Martin Cooper, who invented the mobile phone, was directly inspired by this, the communicator that appeared in Star Trek, which is a cult phenomenon and so well loved by science fiction nerds worldwide. We also have the examples of Arthur C. Clarke, who was one of the finest science fiction writers, who's thought of the communication satellite well before it was launched into space. And William Gibson, who coined the phrase cyberspace and talked about computer hacking in Neuromancer. Now, Jules Verne is, of course, the one credited for kicking off futurology because of his forward-thinking texts. But he, in turn, inspired so many great artists and thinkers of his time. And it's important to take into account that these people gave us glimpses into our current technologies that we now take for granted, technologies such as the airplane, the submarine, radio, satellite, television, the mobile, the internet. All of these technologies, which were once considered science fictional, are now our everyday realities. I think science fiction is important to read, not just because it gives you an insight into this world, but also because what you can learn about yourself. So this is one of the reasons why I'm teaching a course on science fiction at Information Technology University, Lahore, where I interact with this undergrad class, and we talk about anything from racism to implicit bias to things like our role as creators, or what science and technology, the role that these two fields play in our life. And I think we need to be more cognizant of the importance of these two fields in our culture and in our society. And I also want to share with you some work that's happening in this space. When you look at this image, what does it make you feel? Hold on to that feeling. Does it remind you of a world that perhaps has gone by, or a world that you might want to be a part of in the future? Perhaps a remix of the world that we currently inhabit? This is the work of Omar Gilani, who is a visual artist and who takes inspiration from science fiction, who brings in the old and the new, the traditional and the modern, to talk about Pakistan in a future context. It's because we don't only need science fiction produced in the West. We now need science fiction that is desi, that is sort of a part of our national fabric. And to produce the science fiction, we need to start reading it. When you really interact with this artwork, I think it's not hard to figure out that the philosophical and socio-political questions revolving around these themes that this artwork is interested in answering. Things like, what does it mean to be human? What does progress mean for us as a nation? And how can we make our cities more inclusive? Science fiction is such a great medium to talk about all of these things, about feminism, about rights, about things in our past and in our future, about ecology, about politics. And as citizens of an increasingly globalized world, it's our responsibility, because there will be times where we will come across such issues. So we need to face these uncomfortable truths. And we need to, in the process, come towards acceptance, about balance, and about our duty to each other. And I think science fiction is the perfect medium to take us to that direction. Thank you.